الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله وصلى الله على النبي الأمي. So, so basically we've been reviewing the previous durus. So in the last week, we went through the first 10 durus. So if you guys can remember, we used to go through one quotation from the kitab of Ibn Atawla. The name of the book is Al-Hikam. So we used to go to Al-Hikam and read one sentence, one quotation, then explain it throughout the dars and go into all the details of it. And each one is almost like a chapter on its own. So we're going to continue with today's number 11 quotation. He mentions, bury, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Alhamdulillah wa sallallahu ala nabiyina. So the author says, in Arabic of course, bury your existence in the earth of obscurity. Obscurity means like not being known. So be buried in the ground of the unknown. For whatever sprouts forth without having first been buried, flowers imperfectly. So he's talking about seeds. The only way to make a seed grow nicely is you have to hide it first inside the ground. Once it stays inside the ground, inside the dirt and the soil, and you keep it covered, then it starts growing beautifully. But if we leave the seed on top of the soil and we don't bury it, then it's not going to grow nicely because it was never buried first. So he's saying, as personnel, as when we are beginners, we shouldn't try to be like trying to get attention, like, oh, I know a few hadiths, I'm going to tell everybody about it. I'm going to go share this, I'm going to go share this, I'm going to go share this. In fact, if you study some of the quotations of the saints, the awliya, they wouldn't even want their students to go to hadith classes sometimes. They say, oh, whenever you go to hadith class, you become a lecturer. You start giving bayans, and you have no time for yourself. So obviously the point is not to say don't go to dars, don't go to hadith classes. The point was don't become a public person right away. Don't become a public person right away, because generally all the negative side effects start coming in, which is, oh, everybody knows me, my shuhrat, my famousness, and then the focus becomes how much views I get in today's times. Different strange type of qualities start coming in because the basic spirituality is missing. So such a person, when he makes a mistake, it's hard for him to say that he made a mistake, because he's thinking, oh no, somebody might dislike it amongst my fans, my murids, my following. They might not like it when I make mistakes, so they'll hide their mistakes, they'll translate their mistakes in different ways, because their idea is popularity itself. And that's why in one hadith it mentions anybody who gets pointed at, like, oh, he's the guy, he's famous. They say such a person, he's done, he's already destroyed. Oh. Unless if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave you that kind of popularity, then it's okay. But if a person tried to do some things to get that famous, by the time somebody points at you, it's too late. You already made some bad decisions. So popularity by itself is destructive, because it changes a person's behavior. In fact, there were some studies done that by the time you're a leader, your empathy even becomes less. Like the ihsas, the feeling of pain for other people, even that gets less. So let's just say somebody was a common worker at work. By the time he becomes manager, he psychologically changes already. Yeah. Psychologically you change already. There was another famous study in the science world where they took a few people, they put some people in, it was a jail situation, they put some people in jail and they made other people the guards. By the time they made that division, the guards started acting differently already. It's a scientific study, it's not a real criminal case. Mm-hmm. It was just a study. By the time they put the people as guards, their behavior started changing. Within a few days, there was complete chaos in their behaviors. People that were in jail started acting different. and people that were the guards started acting different already. And then it was an old study, but they said now we can't replicate it because because the amount of negative impact it had on the people, it was an illegal type of a situation. So basically what happens is anytime a very awkward scientific study was done on humans or animals long time ago, they're not able to redo it now because according to the law, they're not allowed to do it anymore. So they only can take lessons from the old studies, they can't replicate it again. So this was one of those, it's a famous study of the guards and the prisoners. Yes?
Does it have to do something with intention?
The intention, but also the amount of power a person gets, it changes him. So even if he had good intentions, but the power still changes him a bit. So he has to basically become very self-aware, and then he can control himself and ground himself. That's what grounding is. So like even if you look at the example, they're saying leave the seed in the ground, like ground it. Make it very humbled by the teachings of deen. So like Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, extremely powerful person. But because he spent so much time in worship, in grounding himself, that the power never reached him. Like it never got to his head. He acted like a normal person forever, dressed so normal, nobody can tell who he was in a gathering. So outsiders would come and say, and they would call him by first name, like, hey, where's Muhammad here? And nobody would know, like the common person wouldn't even know. Then a stranger would be told, oh, that's him. And then he'll say, oh, that's the Prophet? Okay, let me talk to him. So can you imagine being a community leader of the highest level, but his behavior was so like mixing and so common that nobody can tell by his behavior that he was anybody different. And obviously that's not us. By the time we have this much power in any environment, if I work in a dollar store even, by the time I have a slightly higher position than the others, I start talking differently with the workers.
That's right.
So our behaviors change too fast, even when we had good intentions. So basically a daily grounding. And that's what tahajjud is. Tahajjud is daily grounding, where you spend a lot of time on the ground with your head on the floor, long sujood, and the more long sujood a person does, the more grounded he's supposed to become. And that's why Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam used to read so many different du'as. There's sometimes collections of 7, 8, 10, 12 du'as, different du'as he used to read in sujood, and sometimes you read the same du'a for like long periods of time because the du'a meant so much to him. The next saying is, nothing benefits the heart more than a spiritual retreat, wherein it enters the domain of meditation. So we spoke about this last week. We're just kind of quickly going through it. So it was Maidan Fikra, the world of thoughts. So the more a person spends time on his own, he can start to focus on what the deen wants him to focus. Otherwise, generally in a society, we start focusing on what the society wants us to focus. So if you look at the West, what is the biggest focus here? Well, job.
Yeah.
That's the only focus we have in the West, is job. Family is number 2, number 3. So job is number 1 for some reason, for sad reason. So as soon as we meet each other, the first question is, what do you do? And somebody was comparing the West to the East, and they said in the East, in Saudi and all those countries, you can know somebody for years, you'll never know what job he does. Because in the East, it's not common to ask somebody what you do.
Yeah.
But in the West, the second question is, what do you do? How are you doing? How's the weather? What do you do? So in the East, nobody asks you like, what job do you do? Because it's not normal to ask somebody what they do. But in the West, our existence is our job. And our society wants us to focus on what degree do you have, how much do you make. But that is not what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made us for. So when a person can pause his social thoughts and start focusing on what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants, he can literally feel like he just woke up and he's in a sleep. Because society can go through psychosis. Psychosis means where everybody has the same brainwashing that's going on. So when there's a grand, like a macro psychosis, everybody's in the same thought. For example, right now we're going through a complete psychosis of the COVID. So we're all thinking about the same darn thing. Somebody coughs, we all have the same thought.
Yeah.
We're like little ducks, like, oh, he coughed. And we're all looking at him like, why did he cough?
Yeah.
So that means we all have the same thought. Not a single person is thinking something else. Although 5 winters ago, if somebody coughed 15 times, nobody would look at him.
In fact, they will bring glass of water for that person.
Yeah, and help him, but now everybody will run. So, so anytime somebody's alone without being like occupied by technology, because technology cannot make you feel alone. You have to be without technology, and then you can really focus. Like, where am I going with my life? You can take one ayat, for example, or one surah, and then you can think about it from that angle. For example, the ayat that says, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم, فمن زحزح عن النار وأدخل الجنة فقد فاز. Anybody who was saved from hell and entered into Jannah, then he is successful. It basically is telling us that after your life is over, if you are saved from Jahannam, you're done, you passed, you're successful. So it specifies success so simply that when you look at your current life and your current stresses, you're like, wait, I don't need to stress about that. I don't need to stress about A, B, C, D, E. My biggest stress is if I don't go to hell, I'm successful. So that generally doesn't happen in our society. We're so focused on the A, B, C, D, E's that we never get to that fikra, that thought. And the next quotation is about the state of the heart. So the author says that, let me simplify it first. He says, if the heart is imagined as a mirror, if a lot of the world is shining or reflecting in it, then how can the thoughts of the Lord be in that mirror if other things are always reflecting in it? So he says, how can the heart be illumined while the forms of creatures are reflected in its mirror? How can it journey, meaning how can the heart journey to God while shackled by its passions? So how can somebody make it to the worship of Allah when his own passions are always holding him down? Or how can it desire to enter the presence of God while it has not yet purified itself of the stain of forgetfulness? So for example, from Maghrib to Isha, I was in my own dunya, just thinking about world, and now when I come for Isha namaz, I'm thinking, inshallah, I'll be able to focus 100%. Although between Maghrib and Isha, my mind was wandering the whole world about worldly matters. So now it's impossible for the heart to suddenly focus on Allah when the whole time I wasn't focusing. So he addresses forgetfulness. Then the last part is, or how can it understand the subtle points of mysteries while it has not yet repented of its offenses? So if I have like 20, 30, 70 different sins that I haven't done tawbah from my past life, now I'm thinking, inshallah, I'll get really high spiritual thoughts. I can't, because I have so much spiritual mess in my mind. I haven't even done tawbah yet. The next quotation is number 14. The cosmos is all darkness. So here he talks about how the dunya, because it's just a creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then the only thing that's really alive is the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he says the cosmos is all darkness. It is illumined only by the manifestation of God in it. Whoever sees the cosmos, but he does not contemplate Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in it, or by it, meaning using the dunya to remember Allah, or before it. So by the time you see dunya, you should imagine the Lord before that, or after it. So you see the dunya, you see the whole world, the whole cosmos, the oceans, the minerals, the humans, the animal life, the marine life. But after all that, our mind should go to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or after it is in need of light and is veiled from the sun of gnosis, that means recognition, by the clouds of created things. So if a person is not able to think about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through the creation, then that means he's completely covered by the creation. He's completely in a clouded state where he's not able to focus on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So for example, let's just say somebody's amazed by gold, silver, diamonds. So now every time he sees gold, he's fascinated, but he can't get his eyes off of it and think about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for a little while. Another person, generally nowadays, people are fascinated by beauty. So people are always talking about looks, but if a person cannot think about looks and then right away his mind goes to the Creator, then that means forever he's going to be stuck in looks. He cannot get past looks. He's just constantly thinking about looks. So like that. Next quotation. That which shows you the existence of his omnipotence is that he veiled you from himself by what has no existence alongside of him. This is very profound. He's saying if you want to understand the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, especially after a person has done some sins, but he hasn't done tawbah. So now he gets further and further in his sins. And he's not able to recognize Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in that time. So he says the fact that a part of the world can fully blind you so much from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that you can't even imagine focusing on Allah because our mind is fully focused on something else. Then he says that's a sign that Allah is very powerful and he's able to take a creation of his and fully drown us in that creation. We can't even snap out of it. If somebody's into drugs, he's always smoking and this and this and that, and you're thinking like, why can't he just stop and say who created these herbs or these weed and these things? Why can't he stop for a second and think about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? But he's fully engrossed in it. So, and you know how they're making goggles? The whatever 3D or whatever they call it, the 3D goggles. Imagine somebody who lives within the goggles for 24 hours. For so long that he forgets which company made those goggles. So you'll be like, wow, that's amazing. He doesn't even know which company made those goggles because he never took them off.
Yeah.
When you take off the goggles, for example, I pick up this iPad, at least I can look back and say, oh, this company made it. So although I'm lost in the iPad, but the moment I lift it, I can at least see which company made it. But imagine somebody who's so lost in dunya that he can't even understand who made dunya. So that's what he's saying, that if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not happy with you and he's not giving you a chance to remember him, that's a sign that he fully left you in the dunya and you're so drowned in it that you can't even see who made dunya. And the next quotation is a detail, and it's kind of longer in a quotation, but he's saying the same thing over and over again with slightly different words. So he mentioned the world exists because of Allah, through Allah, by the assistance of Allah. So Allah created it, and it only continues to function as a world because of the continuous support from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he's using various words, but that's what he's conveying, that the whole world is, for example, an electrical grid, how the electrical system works. So the electrical grid is working, and that's how the malls, the schools, the electrical trains, and all these places, they all get their electricity from this one force. And that's what he's saying, that the one force is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who created this world. How can it be conceived that someone veils him, since he is the one who manifests everything? So veils Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, meaning how can something be a distraction away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? How can something distract us from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when he's the one who made that thing? So if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we can call that for a second the A. How can we be distracted from A when A created B? So if B distracts us, but we don't understand, we don't remember who created that B, it's the A, then that is a really big curse on us. So that's what he's explaining. How can it be conceived that something veils Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, since he's the one who is manifest through everything? So everything is a reminder of the Creator. Then he says, how can it be conceived that something veils him, since he is the one who manifests in everything? How can it be conceived that something veils him, since he is the manifest to everything? Meaning he created everything and he made them exist. How can it be conceived that something veils him since he was the manifest before the existence of anything? That's very beautiful. So he's saying Allah is al-awwal and the world is after that. So how can the world be a distraction for us from al-awwal, the one who was first before the creation? How can it be conceived that something veils him since he is more manifest than anything? So Allah is more manifest than everything else, so we should believe in him and be able to remember him more than anything else. How can it be conceived that something veils him since he is the one alongside of whom there is nothing? Meaning if there was no Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then nothing would exist. So the fact that everything exists, that should be more reminders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if he made, let's just say 1 million creation, that's 1 million reminders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Not 1 million distractions, 1 million reminders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. For example, there's 4 of us sitting here. That's 4 reminders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That Allah made 4 humans at least. That's 4 reminders. How can it be conceived that something veils him since he is the one alongside of whom there is nothing? How can it be conceived that something veils him since he is nearer to you than anything else? So we generally remember things that are close to us, but Allah is closer than these things. How can it be conceived that something veils him since were it not for him the existence of everything would not have been manifest? It is a marvel how being has manifested in non-being. And how so he's saying how everything that was B suddenly became A in our lives. They became more focused on and we forgot A. And how the contingent has become established. So he's saying that contingent means that which depends on something else. So the world is contingent on the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but somehow the contingent became more meaningful to us and more powerful to us than the one who created these things, alongside of him who possesses the attribute of eternity. The next quotation, number 17, he who wishes that there appear at a given moment other than what God has manifested in it has not left ignorance behind at all. So this is talking about how when we complain about what's happening in the world, or in our personal lives, we say, oh, I wanted this to happen, but then this happened. So he's saying if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has manifested something in your life, stop expecting it to change right away. Some people say, oh no, if I had good health, I will go make a lot of money and spend it in the way of Allah. So that would be basically his spending in the way of Allah. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants you to be sick right now so you can do sabr. Allah doesn't want you to be sakhi and be generous. Allah wants you to do sabr, to be a sabir. But we say, no, I want to be somebody who spends. No, he didn't ask you to spend. He wanted you to be sick for this next few months or for whatever amount of time. Some people are sick chronically for life. So they can't say, oh Allah, if you give me lots of time and health, then I'll go make lots of money. He didn't ask you for money. He asked you to be patient in your sickness. If we look at the life of Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam in Mecca, nothing was happening the right way. Everything was upside down. But he never asked that things should change drastically. Sahabas once came and said, this is too much. This is too much. You have to ask Allah for help and for things to change. And he said, no, you're rushing. People before you had way more pains and struggles. You're rushing. All you Sahabas, you're rushing. Don't ask me that things have to change right away. They don't. We're going to suffer because the Lord wants us to suffer, but you're rushing the system of Allah. And it was 13 years. It wasn't 1 month or 13 weeks or 13 months.
You said one word, experimental change.
Yeah, incremental change, yeah. Small changes happen. Big changes don't happen that fast, right? Generally, small changes happen. Your postponement of deeds till the time when you are free is one of the frivolities of the ego. So generally when we ask someone, you need to worship more, he says, inshallah, when I'm free, I'll do all this. So he's saying that's your ego talking. You're never going to be free. So just get focused on whatever. For example, there's 45 minutes before you go to sleep. So just do something good in that much time. Don't say, inshallah, in the summer break when I have lots of time, I'll do a lot of worship. That doesn't happen. It's just the ego's playing with us right now. So he's saying just focus. And there's a saying that a pious person, he's sahibe hal. He's a man of the hour. He's a master of the moment, not a master of the future. So may Allah give us tawfiq to focus on all these beautiful sayings, and may Allah make it easy for us to do the right thing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to do at any given time. Just read a little bit from here, then we're done. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. That which does not afflict the servant could never have afflicted him, and that which afflicts him would never have missed him. So this is a very clear translation of our aqidah, that is, that whatever happens to us, it could have never been avoided, and whatever never happened, we can't say, oh no, if I didn't do this, then this would have definitely happened. We don't play the backwards. This is called retrospectively. So we don't retrospectively think our lives. Many times a person says, oh no, if I didn't go to this job, then my life would have been like this. So that's too much thinking, is going to drive you crazy. Many people go crazy and have depressions because they're thinking of the what ifs of life.
What if in past?
Yes.
Okay.
So the what ifs of the past drive people to insanity. And that's what the hadith mentions. The Arabic word for the if is law. So the hadith says the word law is a door of shaitan, because a person starts imagining a whole new world with his what ifs. And generally that leads to more pain, because a person thinks like, oh, if something this had happened, then I would have been enjoying my life more. So now he's just being more miserable about it. That doesn't mean we can't take lessons from life. We can take lessons all the time. It's just that we can't live in the past. The servant must know that Allah's knowledge has preceded the existence of all that exists in His creation, so He decreed that which exists by His will in the most perfect manner, one that is rendered inevitable. None can overturn it, overrule it, remove it, change it, or affect it in any way. He Most High has said, indeed the command of Allah is an absolute divine decree. So woe to him who comes as an enemy, as a foe to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to Allah's decree, who brings forth a diseased heart, and who is surely a transgressor and a fabricator. So somebody who plays around with destiny, with taqdeer, they generally end up being in a very bad spiritual state. They either say, oh no, we don't do anything, Allah forces us to do everything. They call it Jabariya. There's actually a whole group in the past, they were called the Jabariya, who used to say Allah basically forces us to do everything in life. We never do anything. So that's what he's speaking about, Jabariya. Okay, we'll pause there, inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Yeah, please turn it on.